Hi there, thanks for attending this webinar. My name is Randy McDonald. I'm the president of Harris Email Services, and today's webinar topic is selling pre-construction condos with email marketing. So a bit of a presentation overview, a few words about who we are, our experience in selling pre-construction condos through realtors, what our experience is as far as what property investors want and don't want, and case studies of two past Ontario condo projects, one being a failure and one being a success, and the lessons we've learned from doing those projects along with many others. So a bit about who we are. The company was founded in 2007. Since then we've been focused exclusively on email marketing in the real estate profession. We have a proprietary database of over 1 million investment property owning real estate investors from 70 countries worldwide. That's all of residential, commercial, and recreational. These are not just opt-ins. These are people that we know are actually property owning investors and that own investment properties, which is a big difference from people that just opt in and don't necessarily ever buy a property. To date, in the past 3 years, we've promoted over 30 pre-construction condo projects in Ontario. And our email marketing is fully Castle or Canadian anti-spam law compliant. This is the email law that came into effect and applies to Canadian businesses since July of 2014. Okay, so selling through realtors, our experience, specifically selling pre-construction condos through realtors. What we've found is that the realtors that we've worked with and the realtors that we're on mailing lists for, they're really not educated on how to sell investment properties. Basically, the thing with real estate agents is that what their bread and butter is that what their background is really resale. That's what their training is. That's what their experience is. And really, that's most of the residential property market is resale. This is where they take their courses, the basic courses for getting their license, the continuing education classes, and so forth. So what we found is that what real estate agents are typically doing is they're leveraging the relationship they have with their existing resale clientele, the people that they've either helped buy a house or helped sell a house or both, and then they attempt selling them, investment property as a result of that relationship. What you see happening is that when let's say you're a real estate agent, you've sold someone a house and they've lived in that house for, a few years, and then they can see, people are naturally interested in what their home's value is worth because it's the most valuable asset they own in most cases, and so they find out from their neighbors, what their homes have sold for, and when they see their property appreciating in value, naturally they start getting really interested in real estate as an investment, because they indirectly get into the real estate investing game by buying a property for themselves, and then they start seeing these appreciation in their property despite everything that the media is saying, and then they start saying, okay, well, why don't we do this again, and let's talk to my real estate agent who sold me this house and see if they can set us up with a suitable investment property. Some get interested in starting out with an entry-level priced investment property such as a pre-construction condo. Pre-construction condos are typically the lowest price point that you can get in at, especially if you're buying a smaller unit in a place like downtown Toronto. Pricing can often start at $200,000, which is way less than what people are paying for homes in Toronto, even outside the Toronto area. So what our experience is that most realtors they want to start looking at selling pre-construction condos because it pays them a lot more. The commissions are 4 to 6% for selling a pre-construction property. That compares to 1 to 1.5% commission for as a listing agent, 2 to 2.5% as a buyer representative. What we found with the realtors we work with, though, is that the problem is that most of these pre-construction commissions, they take a long time to pay out. Our experience is they take 8 to 12 months in the Toronto area to start paying out the first % of the commission, and are spread over several years. Whereas the resale commissions are the closings are much quicker, and they typically pay out in 30, 90 days upon closing. Um, and really, there's no sort of way of getting paid for several years with some of these pre-construction properties. There's actually these payday loan companies that are specifically set up for real estate agents and for resale commissions, and they're very inexpensive to use. But these aren't available for pre-construction properties at any price. So there's a real, if you get involved in investment properties, there can be a real kind of feast and famine, where you're doing the deal but then it's paying out very gradually over several year periods. So this is what keeps a lot of real estate agents away from getting too serious about working with investment properties, especially pre-construction. And really, who wants to wait 8 to 12 months for first pre-construction commission payout, and then wait until closing to get fully paid when occupancy can be 2 to 5 years away, especially when you can get your resale commissions immediately with your payday loan type place, or if you can wait 30 to 90 days upon closing. It's kind of a no-brainer for most agents. So as a result, these agents are not because they're not educated on how to sell investment properties, but because their training is with resale properties, these agents focus in marketing and selling properties as an investment, as if they were positioning or offering resale properties. So what you see is that agents are focusing on property features and price, which is what they've been trained to do with resale properties. But they do this very little. They do very little on positioning the pre-construction condo as an investment. And this is definitely square peg and round hole marketing when you're trying to sell using one type of marketing to sell. You're using resale type marketing to sell pre-construction. It's really a square peg and round hole type of marketing. The realtors we've worked with and that we've seen, they focus heavily on the price, especially during the initial stages of the new condo development. You see all these different types of names of sales that they have at the beginning. The friends and family, which is supposedly very early a stage. The platinum event, which is the first broker stage, and then the VIP broker event that's more the public. The agents that haven't sold any projects with the developer are part of the VIP events. And they really stress this whole thing for buying early and getting the best price and selection. And they really consistently, we see this whole thing about urgency that they're trying to convey. Even though it's in Toronto, it's very much a buyer's market, or sorry, a seller. Right, yeah, it's definitely a buyer's market. Still, these agents are really kind of sort of hustling and saying buy now, limited time, that sort of thing. And reality, what our experience with investors and is that the savings that they say that you don't make the money on when that you make the money on a property over a long period of time, and it's on the total value of the property. So what you might save $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 even on buying pre-construction in an early stage and having good selection, it really kind of pales in comparison to the rate of appreciation of that property over 5 to 10 years. It pales in comparison to having a good tenant for all of those years that's willing to pay top dollar. We see very few people are actually buying pre-construction condos to flip. Without taking a huge risk and for not a lot of potential profit. Really the value proposition is buying pre-construction, yes, making an appreciation on those first few years where it's under construction, but then getting a tenant and holding it on to for 5-10 years. That's really where the money is to be made. Otherwise, you're just sort of getting into speculating, and you're putting yourself into much more risk than a long-term hold. So our experience is that not a lot of these resale clients of these agents are, they don't know anything about real estate investing, and so to getting them to buy something like pre-construction, where really you just have some brochures, some floor plans, and in some cases having a sales center, some cases not, with a model suite. There's a lot of unknowns, and so it's makes it a difficult sell to these resale clientele. So what I see is that most real estate agents, the vast majority of them are keeping focused on just the bread and butter business, the resale properties, but yet some occasionally do dabble in pre-construction properties, especially if they've got clients that want to buy in a few years in an area they downsize. They're empty nesters. Like, to give you an example, my parents basically are empty nesters, and they had their executive home in Mississauga that they spent several years renovating, sort of fattening the calf. And during that time, they were interested in moving into Niagara Falls on the Canadian side, so they actually bought a pre-construction townhouse well in advance of when they moved out. And then once they moved out, they were actually willing to rent a condo unit for about a year, which is where they lived, and then moved into their townhouse. They didn't actually wind up buying because the developer went back on their what they had said about a lot about the property. They were actually bailed on that deal and bought a townhouse elsewhere. But they are a good example of someone that would buy a pre-construction condo in Toronto, and while they're going through the process of moving out of their old place, and then by the time the place is ready for occupancy, they put their house up for sale, move in, and basically downsize. And so I think that's where a lot of resale agents are getting people interested in buying pre-construction properties as an end user, not as an investor. So for developers that are offering pre-construction condos and selling them through realtors, it's really a big numbers game. Developers must enlist as many realtors as possible. For instance, in the GTA alone, there's 30,000 realtors in Toronto, in the Greater Toronto area, which we have a database of most of those agents. We've marketed many different types of projects. But even with these numbers of agents, even so, these condo projects in Toronto are usually taking at least 1 to 3 years to fully sell out. So you can see, with even with that many agents, to sell a building of 400, 500, 600 units, some of these larger buildings still does take a lot of time to sell. And so the agents are they're certainly a big part of that, but they're certainly not the only way of selling these properties. The other problem is that with real estate investing, most realtors, they talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. Few realtors are actually buying investment properties, especially they're not buying them in the geographic areas they sell, and especially not in the specific condo projects they sell. What my experience is that it's really kind of like the developers sort of say jump, and the agents sort of all say how high when a new project comes out, especially if it's from a big, well-known developer that everyone wants, that's very reputable and is really expect to have strong sales on its own. As soon as the developer sort of starts coming out and saying, hey, this project is available, well, all the agents just sort of jump on board, and and it's really kind of the developers that are pushing the envelope, and it's not really necessarily the agents that are sort of saying to their clientele, these are the projects that are out there right now, and these are the ones that I think you should buy, either for an end user if you're looking to be an empty nester, or if you want to buy it as an investment. It's more that they're just reactively going with whatever is sort of the hot project out there. And again, that goes back to the whole thing of these agents only knowing how to sell resale properties, and only knowing therefore to sell based on price and features of the property. So really, because these agents are, the realtors who don't have own investment properties, they really don't have much of an idea of what's involved in an income property. For instance, what's involved with being a landlord, anything, and really because of that, they don't know what investors want and don't want with an investment property. Here's a good example. We've previously had involvement with a Toronto realtor team who had sort of a group of agents that under them they were arranging one-day sales at one point, and anyways, they would put out these really good reports on sort of their picks for the next year for pre-construction condos in Toronto, which ones they thought were the best. and that sort of thing. And anyways, they were occasionally polling their resale investor database, and asking them certain key questions, and then sharing the results with their database. So one question that I always remember that they asked was, what are the top incentives we could offer you for buying a pre-construction condo? And then they offered them a list of incentives to rank. And so the agent said they were shocked to learn that the number one incentive their buyers wanted was a guaranteed tenant. In other words, if they are buying the property as an income property and they want to have a tenant, they wanted to see that the developer would be guaranteeing a tenant, along with property management services as well. And they were actually shocked to learn that. And if you were an investor and knowing having income properties, you would know that certainly that you wouldn't be shocked when people would say that, because really a tenant is the most important part, really, of a long-term held property. Um, and so it just shows you how even agents that position themselves as sort of investor, um, consultants, and selling condos, even they are often quite a bit out of touch with their market of investors and what they want and what they don't want. And this is just proof positive that they were actually shocked to learn that the number one incentives their buyers wanted was a guaranteed tenant. So really, our experience is that the only realtors who have at least a modicum of skill selling in properties and investments are those who are investment properties. Those who are doing it themselves. Those that are walking the walk and buying investment properties for themselves. Seeing the returns, seeing what's involved in being a landlord, see what's involved in being a signing, et cetera, et cetera. And then they see the whole process through, and then they have a much better understanding of what to do and what not to do, and then they can definitely add a lot of value to what they offer to their clientele with that knowledge. When they don't have it, they're in fundamentally a different breed than the investors who are walking the walk, or the agents that are walking the walk. So as a result, what we've seen is that realtors resale condo who actually do buy pre-construction condos as an investment, not as end users, they're very often doing this purely based on speculation, and little not at all based on market research. For instance, MLS resale comparables of other condos in the area, whether they be resale or another area that they don't have access to, but we've had access to, is through the company RealNet, where RealNet offers data on pretty much the availability of the pre-construction condo market for Toronto and for the GTA. So you can look up a given building and find out where it's at, find out what it's selling for, and then compare that to the resale market for condos in that area of buildings that have been built in the last, say, 5 years that are comparable in features and newness and all that sort of thing. So they're not really giving this market research much, if at all, on what's what and what's better, what's best, or they're not giving any insight on the fundamentals of investment property owning. For instance, having strong positive monthly cash flow. I always remember something Kevin O'Leary said about buying a stock. The guy from Dragon's Den and Shark Tank, the well-known Canadian investor. He said, never buy a stock if it doesn't have a dividend. And that's as true with stocks as it is with real estate. In other words, you never want to buy a property that doesn't have at least some positive monthly cash flow. In other words, after all the expenses are taken care of, that you still have some money left over to put in your pocket each month if the property's resale value is not going up or is flat. At least you've got that. In a lot of cases in Toronto, it's very difficult, if not impossible right now, to make these properties cash flow for various reasons, to have strong positive cash flow. So really, again, it's just based on speculation. They are just sort of getting people to buy in these areas that are seen as can't lose, like for instance the downtown Toronto core, and just saying, look, you can buy here and park your money for a few years pre-construction, either keep it and get a tenant, or assign it to an investor or sell it to an end user. So you've got various exit strategies, but really they're just hoping to make money. There's nothing very much substantial in terms of any sort of market insight that's given to these people. Our other experience too is that agents, even the ones that have been buying investment properties themselves and cash flow properties with tenants, is that they kind of just disappear after the pre-construction sale. They sell the property, and of course they want to make sure that their client is making the payments along the way towards their deposit. They're typically not having to pay, at least in Toronto, all of it up front in terms of deposit. They're spreading it out. And again, this is I think agents are influencing the developers where, for lack of any better marketing, they're having to compete on price, and that not only includes the resale price, but also the terms of payment, and so making it less expensive, or in this case, payment spread less is really the biggest positioning that most condo developers have, and really we know that when you sell something based on price, there's always sort of a race to the bottom, and it's not it doesn't convey the value of something. So anyways, what we found is a lot of agents, after they sell pre-construction property, they usually just leave the clients be, and they don't make sure they're making the payments, of course, but they're not necessarily helping them find a tenant. Anything that where it's their own self-interest, that's when they're there, making sure the clients are making the payments, helping them assign the unit or sell to an end user. This is where they take another commission, but doing the necessary things such as finding a tenant. This is often where they either disappear or are ill-equipped on their own to be providing a tenant in a timely fashion upon occupancy that will help them make this an income property on a long-term basis. Another thing that we see that's not really related to realtors is this constant pessimism and negativity that we see in the public eye, in the media, as far as real estate investing. Really what you see is a lot of people sounding off in the media that don't even work in the real estate business, that aren't there day to day like real estate agents, seeing how things work and the realities of it. And so what you see is that journalists are out there talking to so-called experts, and what you wind up getting in the media is very amateurist sort of analysis that's either done by the journalists, or people that have sort of a bias against real estate, who want to come in and say, here's why you shouldn't invest in real estate. And you don't often see actually these journalists. We all know that bad news sort of sells, and that's what they want, and misery loves company kind of thing. And so you don't actually see these journalists often going to real estate agents, going to the well-known people that have market insight and asking them, what do you think? How about a counterpoint to what this guy from CMHC says, or this guy from whatever that's speaking against or saying that there's a bubble or whatever. So really what you wind up getting is really kind of amateurish real estate market analysis, very alarmist, very kind of Chicken Little, sort of the sky is falling kind of thing, that is really not true, that is really not accurate, and it really just does a lot to scare the public. So what happens is that when you have these agents that are really kind of selling, going fast, limited time, that sort of approach, it doesn't do anything to bolster their sort of image in the public eye, as far as being professional and knowledgeable and that sort of thing. So so as a result, the people will listen to the Toronto Star. They will listen to these different newspapers and things on the TV or the radio or whatever, and then they will see them as the ones that are experts. They will see them as the ones to listen to and take advice from, and it's really, really unfortunate. As a result, what you see here is that because people are buying investment properties purely based on speculation, they're far more easily influenced by the negative media and the skeptics and doubters. If someone is getting, in based on emotion, that they want to look cool, maybe they hey, tell people, hey, I bought an investment condo or whatever. It's often the same people who are just as easily influenced the other way by the negative media, and the skeptics and doubters. We're talking about their lawyer, their accountant, the people who supposedly friends and family who are trying to save them from, making a bad investment and losing money, you know, and it's and they're more influenced by these skeptics and doubters than the people who actually invest based on solid market research and based on fundamentals like solid positive monthly cash flow. So what we've seen with the realtors that we've worked with and their resale clientele and even their investor clientele that have bought investment properties before is that the buyer's remorse with pre-construction condos is huge. It's far more than with resale properties. Tons of investors we've seen with these agents have gotten cold feet during the cooling off period after sale and then cancel their deals. In Ontario, there's a 10-day off cooling off period, the rescission period, where the developer is not allowed to cash the check of nor the agent, of course, of the investor, and that they have 10 days to think it over, to do their own due diligence and come to a decision. And really, we've seen this in droves of people bailing on their deals and buyer's remorse. And really, we see the reason why is that people are getting in based on emotion, speculation, and they're getting out based on emotion, negativity, and all that sort of thing. So this here is a good example of a very good example of someone who is the media as being positioned as experts and and a reputable source such as the CBC. This is Amanda Lang from the Lang O'Leary report, and here she is interviewing a fellow by the name of Hilliard Macbeth on why he believes Canada's housing market is a bubble that will burst. And so, this was just on found this through Yahoo actually in October of 2014. And if you'd like a copy of this, a link to this, you can just click on the little button that you see flashing up above. But basically what this guy is saying is that it's about a 6-minute interview, and it's really deceiving because first of all, what the journalist doesn't point out is that this person, Hilliard Macbeth, who's writing a book right now on why he believes the Canadian housing market is not just Toronto, but the entire Canadian housing market is a bubble that will burst. He's predicting a 40 for 50% crash, as worse, if not worse, than the U.S. in recent years. It's when people see this, they see a person that's authoritative, or at least comes off as such, and they believe it. But what the journalist doesn't point out in this is that this Hilliard Macbeth has a company that sells competitive products to real estate. He's selling, mutual funds and typical bank investments, and that is never even mentioned in this, nor is that it's pointed out. And so, it's definitely worth watching this video to just see the kind of just absurdity that gets put into people's heads, that talking about real estate markets on a national level and how this is seen as good analysis. Anyone that knows anything about real estate, especially real estate, just know that real estate, whether it's for resale or for investment, is a very localized market. One neighborhood in one area is doing something completely different than the neighborhood that's adjacent to it, and that one's doing somewhat different than the neighborhood that's adjacent to that, and so on and so forth. If you look, I remember once seeing with the Toronto Star, they actually had a good article for once on real estate, and it was showing each neighborhood in Toronto, and basically showing and saying, well, this is what the properties did. I think it was between about 2010 and 2011. This was the aggregate, either based on MLS resale data. This was the aggregate increase or decrease for this neighborhood between 2011 and 2010, 2011. And what you actually saw with it, there was great diversity. in the different neighborhoods, and in terms of what they were doing. Were they doing well? Were they doing okay? Were they doing bad? Or were they doing poor? I remember seeing some neighborhoods were going up by 10%. Some were going up by 5. Some were down by 10%. I mean, it was all over the map. The whole grid of this map just looked like a patchwork quilt. So there was certainly no uniformity, and anyone that knows anything about the real estate business knows that making any sort of blanket statement about an entire national market, unless there is something like there was in the States where there was just lending galore without restriction, um, you know, policy changes like that, it's certainly misleading analysis. And but again, this is something that good market insight can counter, and basically expose to show how shoddy and amateurish it really is, and show, look, this is true market insight. These are the facts. We're not just putting a spin on it. This is factual information. Real estate markets, in this area, they're going up, and here's what's happening over a 5 or 10 year period. Very hard to debate with that. So here's our experience with what investors want and don't want. First of all, let's talk about what investors don't want. What we think real estate investors really don't want is they don't want all of the how to invest in real estate education that's out there. By and large, this is what they do not want. An entire industry of real estate education exists out there. There's books, there's CDs, there's DVDs, there's weekend courses, their mentorship packages, etc. One challenge is that when you have American educators that are trying to bring it up into Canada, that is often very much square peg and round hole sort of such scenario, where I've literally seen, at least in one case, a local investor in Toronto, absolutely ruined from financially from listening to an American guru on what they should do as far as buying property in Canada. So with this material, these investment gurus, really what they're trying to do is mold the public into their own self-image. They're trying to make themselves the next Donald Trump or the next Robert Kiyosaki or the next whatever, even though most people don't have what it takes to successfully invest in real estate all by themselves, or don't want to do themselves. A few years back, in maybe about 2007, I saw at the Learning Annex in Toronto, they had it headlined. It was like an investing expo, and they had it headlined by Tony Robbins and Donald Trump. And I saw the keynote by Donald Trump, and I always remember something that he said. He said, there's about 4,000 people in the room, and he said to the people in the room, quite frankly, he said, look, I want to be honest with you people. Most of you don't have what it takes to be successful in real estate investing or investing as a full-time career, period. He said, the biggest difference between, those who succeed and those that don't is their ability to handle pressure. And that's always something I've kept in the back of my mind as I've gone along the last 7-8 years being self-employed. But even someone like the Donald acknowledges that most people aren't cut out for real estate investing. You can give them all the information that you want, but in most cases they don't have what it takes. They're not entrepreneurs. It's not who they are. It's not something that they aspire to be or even want to be. And many just don't want to do it themselves. So what you actually see in some cases is what I call a seminar junkie. These are the people that sort of want to. Maybe they, one guy I know in particular used to be a successful business owner and now sort of fallen off the wagon, and it's just really just kind of destitute now, actually. But he loves to go and see Raymond Aaron. He loves to go and see the local gurus and buy up their their education and their courses and stuff. But he never actually does anything with it. He's just sort of on to the next deal and the next deal and whatever looks sort of the shiny object in the river kind of thing. He's actually admitted to me that he mostly gets something out of it for the juice, the enthusiasm, the energy, the charisma that he sees in the Raymond Aarons and so forth. And so that's what you see a lot of is seminar junkies who may opt in and so forth, but never actually buy a property, never actually have the guts to do it. The other things investors don't want is they don't want to buy based on speculation. buying and speculation is based on an emotional decision, not a rational decision. A rational decision based on certain fundamentals and criteria of investing in real estate. So, a key thing to understand is that if someone buys based on emotion, they will typically sell based on emotion as well. They hear someone. We've heard about people seeing, having a pre-construction condo and seeing an article in the news, and then calling the real estate agent saying, I want out, I want out, it can be from the pressure from their spouse, or they can't find a tenant, or all these different things, and so so really it's kind of the idea of sowing wind and reaping whirlwind. If your buyers are not buying confidently based on rational decisions, not just speculation, what you're going to see is just a lot of buyer's remorse, a lot of churn as far as people getting in and then getting out right away. And we'll see that here in the example we've got coming up about a project we did back in the spring of 2014 about exactly how has that played out. So really, what investors do want? To them, minimizing risk is more important than return on investment. Most people prefer having a low, even very low yield, turnkey real estate investment, or any investment they perceive as relatively safe and secure. For instance, a mutual fund, an RRSP, a GIC government issued certificate with minimal to non-existent chance of loss, rather than a higher yield investment such as real estate that is seen as more risky by most people, for all these reasons that we've been talking about. Better safe than sorry is the public's mindset as far as real estate, any sort of investing. And this is why people are wanting to go with bank investment offerings so often. We all know that banks are highly averse to risk, and that's just a reflection of the public. Banks wouldn't exist if people were, at least not on the scale that they do. If people were more risk-taking and more driven and more entrepreneurial and more not saying, I'll put up with 1 or 2% return or even a loss in some cases. I was amazed to hear people actually losing money on their RSPs and things like that. After all of the bank fees and all of that are settled. It's amazing. So, what investors do want, what they want is turnkey investments, okay? Turnkey is basically where the investor says, I write a check and you do everything else. That's what people get when they buy an investment from a bank. The investor says, let the experts handle my money. The investors don't want to reinvent the wheel by learning how to do it themselves, such as, they don't want to become real estate investing, experts themselves. They just want to align themselves with experts, whether it be a real estate agent or a mortgage broker, or, in one case, as we'll see, even the developer can get in on this marketing and positioning and really kind of change the game. So here's an example of a case study first example of two of past condo products we marketed, and this one we consider a failure, at least in relative terms of what it could have been, and also we'll next talk about a success. So failure, this is a Toronto downtown core condo project. This is in the spring 2014. So basically we were working with an agent who saw that this was a really good opportunity, and they really wanted to go all in with their marketing. They just said, what, this is a really good location. It's right in the core of downtown Toronto. It's a very good price point, et cetera, et cetera. So this agent actually really went all in and spent $30,000 on advertising in various mediums. Most of it actually was not with us. It was actually with newspapers, with print. I believe there was some radio done, that sort of thing. So it's rare for a single realtor to spend anything close to that much money. But because this agent, about 70% of their clientele was investor and only about 30% was resale, they decided to really kind of go in, like you see here in the poker game, basically putting all the chips on the table and all that. So what they did is they had a one-day lunch and learn sales event for the condo project, and they promoted it, spent $30,000 in advertising, and over 250 people attended. So basically they were able to get 55 people submitting worksheets and deposit checks to the realtor at the event. A great success, right? So what the agents essentially, their positioning was, as it was with most of these projects, was the idea was buy first and ask questions later. So what they wanted to do is, because they had so many people in the room, they wanted to convey a sense of scarcity. You know, that look at how many, look at how much interest there is in this building. You know, which is really kind of an illusion. To get, you know, where when they get that many people in the room, it doesn't necessarily indicate, you know, the market health or how many people are interested. It's more that they just spent a huge amount of money on advertising. So Realtor, they tried to convey a sense of scarcity to the attendees, even though it was a brand new, almost totally unsold, or perhaps totally unsold building, from a not a very well-known developer, actually quite a small developer. So the idea is that they're trying to convey is to people that, look, if you don't buy today, this inventory may be picked over, since there are so many people in attendance. You know, there's 250 people here. You know, there's a limited number of units in this building. There's perhaps maybe 400 or 500 units. You know, probably didn't give the people a sense of how many were sold. You know, this is a project that can't lose because of the downtown core, so et cetera, right? So they this whole scarcity mindset would have been put into these people. And so, but at the same time, they gave them this reassurance where they said, okay, we'll buy today at the event and do your own due diligence, and you go do your own due diligence, okay, during the 10-day rescission period, okay? So making very clear to these people that they, you know, they sign the dotted line today, you know, submit a worksheet. If they didn't bring their checkbook, you know, give us a check within, you know, whatever, 24 hours. And, you know, if you want to cancel your deal for any reason, by law, we must give you your deposit check back on cash. So you have nothing to lose and everything to gain by buying today, okay? So, you know, the idea was 55 people submit a worksheet and deposit at the one-day sales event. Now, what actually went up happening is 43%, 43 of those investors, or 78%, got cold feet and canceled their purchases during the 10-day. That's a huge amount of buyer's remorse, and only 12 of the investors actually kept their purchase beyond the 10-day rescission period. So, you know, instead of a $400,000 plus, you know, commission, you know, which would have been more than enough for most people for a year or two, for a single project, the realtor only made about $130,000. They spent $30,000 on marketing, so they only netted $100,000. I mean, pretty successful for, you know, that one project, but still, there was a huge falling away, and I was always asking myself, you know, well, why was that? You know, what went wrong? Why did, you know, 4 out of 5 people roughly say, hey, you know, we don't believe in this project. We did initially, but now we don't. We want out. Well, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, the positioning of this agent, and only really positioning it, like with the resale training, positioning it as such, based on price and features. You know, they only had it really as a low price point, so the unit started at $199,800. They had a high projected cash flow for the property, so $654 per month would be the net cash flow per month projected, you know, not actual, because the thing is pre-construction, and, you know, unless people are locking in their interest rate and terms from day one, you know, that was just projected, and I think some people, when they actually looked at that, saw that was kind of a very high projection, but, you know, it was certainly a question mark. Could a project get that amount of positive cash flow? Do the numbers make sense? So these are the bullet points they used to position the product. It was the first opportunity to buy. It was priced from $199K. Preferred deposit structure, in other words, a common developer tactic of allowing the payments to be spread over a long period of time, so that people, even if they're renting, can start saving up, and you know, they don't have all the money right up front, but they can, you know, pay it off over a several-year period, and someone can transition from renting to buying. You know, that's who it certainly appeals to. Caps on closing costs. You know, we don't like to have all those little sort of gotcha, you know, or hidden fees, you know, things like that. You know, free property management for 1 year provided. What that actually entailed was not explicit. It did not mean that there would be a tenant provided. It just meant that, you know, actually I don't really know what it meant, to be honest, but that was where that was a little bit deceptive. You know, property management might have been something as simple as just, you know, picking up the check from the tenant, something like that. Free assignment, you know, that's something that a lot of developers offer anyway. So, you know, that, you know, and much more. There really actually wasn't much more, but there you have it. So this is how the realtor positioned this project. Now, they claimed that the annual return on investment was 19.6%. That was totally based on the amount of money put into the down payment. It wasn't based on capital appreciation. And then they claimed that the amount of a return on investment at the year of occupancy, several years off, would be 108%. So really, this was kind of a deceptive way of positioning the property, because they're saying, it sounds great on paper, doesn't it? Park your money during pre-construction phase, take it out before occupancy by either selling it to an end user buyer or assign to an investor, or get a tenant and hold on for long-term capital appreciation. They're focusing on the appreciation of the deposit, which was 15%, rather than appreciation of the entire unit in 3 to 5 years. Obviously, that takes a lot more work, people invest in real estate for leverage. They want to know the appreciation of the total of their investment, not just the deposit. They want to know, if they buy a $300,000 condo, they want to know how much of the total amount, the $300,000, is going to change over time, not just the $45,000 or so that they put in a down payment. That's insignificant compared to the appreciation of the total value of the $300,000. So really, real estate agents are actually sitting on a gold mine that they almost never, in our experience, utilize, and that is their local MLS resale data that have at their disposal. So, like they could be putting together, like these agents could have been putting together information on the local market for condos, in the immediate vicinity of this project, looking at the MLS data for the several years of it even, and saying, here's what's happening with condo prices in the area, this is what they've been doing, here's what it is per building, here's what it is per average, and here's what it looks like over the last 5-10 years. And that would give people much more of a sense of the local market. Is there going to be new projects that are going to be built in the area in the next 5 years? They can dig really deep. They can start looking at zoning applications, and finding out, is there going to be new buildings? If 5 years from now, are there going to be 10 new projects, or are there going to be 20 new projects, or are there going to be 2 new projects? All of this is very relevant to the ultimate resale value of a condo from day one. Okay, so none of this is offered to these agents. So it's something that resale agents do with the farm neighborhoods they focus on. Is they put together the resale data for comparable homes in the area of the house that they're trying to hopefully get the listing for. But we've never actually seen this done with the agents that we've worked with, even though this data is always available to them at any time. So this realtor in this case was focused on positioning the investment as an assignment. Buy it now, flip it in the next 5 years before occupancy to another investor, or sell it to an end user upon occupancy, and really pray the property has appreciated in value during construction. So it's basically being sold based on speculation. Good speculation in the sense that it was located in the downtown Toronto core, which is seen by many people as sort of a can't-lose proposition. But the problem with some of these, even with location, even with something being located in the downtown core, the problem with some condo developers is they price pre-construction condos factoring into the original sale price 2 to 3 year appreciation in the local market, and leave little to no money on the table for investors buying units in that. So let's give you an example. Okay, so these are not really numbers reflecting the Toronto market, but just for the sake of example, let's say you sell a 1-bedroom pre-construction condo for $225,000 today. Okay, whereas the local market for comparable 1-bedroom resale units built in the past 5 years at $200,000 at the moment when that pre-construction condo was bought. So let's say in 3 years the property appreciates in value 5% for 3 years straight, which is not out of line for, say, Toronto. Okay, so at the end of year one, we see right here your $200,000 property, 5% appreciation. It's gone up by $10,000, so up to $200,000. And factoring in compound, okay, so the end of year two, 210,000 times 5%. 220,500, end of year 3, 220,500, 5%, 231,000. So really, the condo's market value has only appreciated a measly $6,000 in 3 years in actual market value because it was overpriced from the start. Okay, so let's just say in this case, really what you've really got to do is look at the comparables in the area and seeing, is the developer trying to just price these units to basically make the money on the appreciation during construction, or are they leaving it on the table for the investors, or is it a bit of both? Um, so really, in sort of at the end of year three, um, the property is only appreciated by $6,000 because it was overpriced from the start. Okay, so so let's say the condo was built and after 3 years in occupancy, now you have to find a tenant or a buyer. Really, how ready is the building to move into upon occupancy? We've seen some horror stories where people, the buildings are often behind schedule, and occupancy is, rushed, and the building isn't finished and makes it less attractive. They have deficiencies in both the common units and common areas, and so they make them less rentable or sellable, than units in other buildings that have had all the rough spots smoothed away. Um, so really, it's often the developer's reputation. Do they put out good product? Are they known for, when it's occupancy, that they are putting a project out there? These are the things you want to put in your marketing to make it known. That upon occupancy, the building will look attractive enough that you can get a tenant right away, if you so choose, and people will want to rent it and live there, and that you won't have a situation where um, would-be renters are seeing the unit and looking at other buildings in the area and just going with them because yours is not complete. The hallways are not finished, not carpeted. There's deficiencies in the unit, etc. So after occupancy, the investment moves from relatively safe to risky after the occupancy. When the realtor does little or nothing for helping find a tenant, investor doesn't know how to get a good tenant or a tenant at all. In this case, the realtor said offering tenants was too much of a hassle. They weren't encouraging long-term holds, which is really the route to wealth in real estate. It's not just speculation and flipping, which the developers are discouraging anyway. Um, so let's just say in this situation, this someone had bought a unit, and for whatever reason, let's say the building wasn't fully up to snuff. There was problems with it, or they just the investor forgot its occupancy, and then let's say for the first 3 months they can't get a tenant. Now all of a sudden the investors start to panic. They're saying to themselves, maybe the thing was overpriced, and that they're trying to make too much money on it. They don't know how to handle it professionally, and maybe the real estate agent just doesn't care, or maybe they're out of the business. Many agents are leaving the business. So let's say the first 3 months there's no tenant. The investor can panic. They're paying 2 mortgages now that they can perhaps ill afford, and so they're rapidly losing money on any of the gains that they've made in overall value. And a lot of people, they can't handle this stress. They might see something in the media, and it all confirms what they thought, or what people have been telling them, and then they think they made a mistake, and then they want to get out. The people that got in based on emotion, they often, as I said, want to get out based on emotion, and so just a temporary problem like not having a tenant can make people panic and just throw away what could have been a really good appreciating property if they just had a tenant and had done things more professionally, had worked with professionals. So they want to sell ASAP. So let's say they want to sell the unit through the same realtor. They say, hey, well, we want out. So let's say they pay 1.5% listing fee, 2.5% buyer fee. The purchase price. So their commission, 4% commission on $231,000 value is almost $10,000. Purchase price is $225,000. The market price is $231,000. Um, the commission fee is after there's a loss on this property, and that's not even counting the closing costs or anything else. And so when people bail on the first few months, there's often a situation where they're losing money. And what's the worst thing is they tell the 10 of the friends that pre-construction condos in that area are a bad investment. So the moral of the story is that make sure when you're doing pre-construction sale price, it's not too far above price of comparable resale units in relatively new buildings in the area when the unit is sold. Reason being is that let's just say there's a condo that's right now is not going to be built for, say, 4 years, right? And let's say there's a building that is occupancy is today, okay? Well, 4 years from now, we've got occupancy in our building, and that other building is only 4 years old. Well, that other building might be seen as more, just as appealing. It's only 4 years old. Everything is still fresh there. All of the rough edges and moved, so what you want to do is leave money on the table for investors. Don't oversell, don't overprice your condos from day one, so that investors are not able to make them cash flow and not willing to hold on to them long term. You know, people will often stay in a unit if they get, you know, reasonably good price for a rental. They often want to stay there for years, and that's really, you know, the key to you know, to stability in the building, to having good tenants, to having satisfied investors. So really, again, the moral: make sure pre-construction sale price is not too far above price of comparable resale condo units in relatively new buildings in the area when the unit is sold. Another thing too is that what realtors, or better yet, even the developers, should formally align themselves with a top-notch property management company located very near the condo project, so in the immediate area, someone that is in touch with the local market, who can provide all property management services, especially sourcing and screening tenants to investors wanting income property held long term. This discourages the speculation and flipping, when people know that they can hold on to it long term, and then they also have a sense of what's happening in the local market in the last few years in terms of price appreciation. It may be that these properties are appreciating 5–10% per year. Naturally, people will want to hold on to something like that if they can see that there's consistency in recent years, say the last 5 years, even 10 years, and that there's not a lot of inventory coming onto the market after this one, that there's not a lot of, you know, applications for other buildings. People want to, and people want to hold on to the units. So when you have a professional property management company who knows the market, who knows how to get good tenants, knows the good from the bad, and can provide your, you know, your investor clients with this, it makes a lot of them, you know, it discourages speculation, makes a lot more of them want to stay in the building longer term, and encourages more people to buy and not get out right away, like we've seen so much of this buyer's remorse before. Professional property management companies can provide a steadily employed tenant with good credit history and references, paying top dollar for rent, and that's a critically important part of effectively positioning a pre-construction condo, and thereby greatly reducing risk in investor eyes. You know, really, people know, investors know, that have had properties for as long as a tenant is paying the mortgage, the investor wins with property appreciation in the long run, regardless of short-term market ups and downs. So the second case study we want to talk about is a success, and a rousing success, really, and you know, this really highlights all the things that we've seen as contributing to a successful marketing mix for selling properties as an investment. This was a Waterloo student condo project. It's by far the most successful pre-construction condo project we've worked on, and the reason is, we are 100% convinced, is that the project was positioned by the developer themselves as a truly turnkey investment, and it really made the project sell like hotcakes. So these are the bullet points that the developer had on their website for selling this as an investment, because they know people are buying. You know, if someone can't live in a unit for, you know, 3, 4, 5 years, they know initially most people are buying a unit as an investment, you know. And so you know, what we've seen lacking with so many condo developers is that they're all of their emphasis is put on selling the project as a you know, to end users, you know, the nice looking brochures, the rendered, you know, the builder renderings and all this sort of stuff. But so little, if anything, is put into positioning the project as an investment. And this is where this developer was completely the opposite, and presented the project first and foremost as an investment, and I'm convinced 100% why it sold so well. So these are the bullet points that they use. So they were able to show rental market demand by having a demand synopsis report that was put together by a local property management company that provided tenants and was expert in that area, and specifically in student condos, that they had formally aligned themselves with this property management company. In this report, they put together the benefits of the 1 and 2 bedroom suites, and why those were there in relative shortage compared to the what was available in inventory around the area in terms of houses, large houses that students live in. You know, they were also showing how this is an easy investment. where, well, first of all, just stepping back here, Intelligent City, they showed why Waterloo was a great city to invest in, why it's ranked with rain and always in the top 3 or 4 cities in Ontario, and why there was why there would be growth and why there was demand. Very, very intelligently put together um, marketing by this developer. They'd also been able to put together a leasing guarantee with the property management company. So basically, they had a property management company that would handle everything to do with the unit in terms of providing the tenant, collecting rent checks. If eviction was necessary, they would handle all of that, etc. And they also provided a leasing guarantee where for depending on the phase of the project, 1, sometimes 2 years, they would guarantee a tenant, and that was really unheard of in the other condo projects that we've done in Toronto. But it was certainly a very, very effective positioning and getting people interested in the project. They really understood the student market. And they know that students coming, especially if they're first year students coming from home, wherever they lived, they typically don't have nice furnishings, and so they actually offered, they had about 4 different furnishing packages, options where they would furnish the units as well, put some nice furniture in there, and just, I know myself, I lived in residence at the University of Toronto at the Mississauga campus back in the 90s. And the furniture there was, quite frankly, terrible. We just had to make do with, and then we actually went and got a few couches, just used ones, which made it a lot better. But the furniture sucked that they were giving us. So, to be able to offer something nicer, certainly attracts a better, client that's willing to pay more. Financing program was in place, and the pricing was really good. Again, about $199 for entry level. So all of this made it very attractive as an investment. In fact, if you'd like to see a copy of this report, just click the little button up above, and we'll get that to you. The actual market demand report that was provided by the property management company that was involved in this project, and what I believe was a key part of making this project sell as well as it did. So again, the developer, a big secret behind this is they formally aligned themselves with the local Waterloo property management company specializing in the student housing market. Just a 2-page document about the supply and demand of student properties in the area, and why student condos were such a niche but such a need, type of product needed in that immediate area, etc. So again, 1 and 2 bedroom unit research. This is what this property management company report has that I'm offering you now, if you'd like a copy of it. 1 and 2 bedroom unit research for Waterloo, Ontario. They had current availability on 1 and 2 bedroom suites. They had the features of existing 1 and 2 bedroom suites, rental statistics of existing 1 and 2 bedroom suites, viability of additional 1 and 2 bedroom suites entering the market. I mean, really, really good, factual, hard data that people could just basically look at and say, wow, there is a real demand for these types of units. Therefore, they're going to appreciate well. You've made it truly turnkey. I'm in, and people were saying that by droves, in droves. So the result, the realtor we worked with sold more units in the 5 units phases of this condo project than all of the many over 20 condo projects we work with on that with that realtor combined. So in other words, this one Waterloo project in multiple phases sold more units. This agent sold more units in this than all the other projects, the 20 or so projects that we work with them in Toronto combined. Okay, that speaks volumes. Okay. In fact, one of the phases, I believe it was, I believe it was the 3rd or 4th phase of this project, 3rd or 4th building rather. It actually sold out within about 10 days, even before it was publicly offered to, like at a broker event, like a VIP broker event. It was sold out from that, and that's unheard of in Toronto. Okay, and it's not because it's Waterloo; it's because the developer put so much good marketing behind it, and that's why it sold so well. So the moral of the story here, when you market a condo project as turnkey, which they did, the developer did, with strong growth indicators, such as with that market research report for the local rental market demand, supply and demand, and a guaranteed tenant, all of these little ingredients equaled strong appreciation plus minimal risk. Okay, so when you can give people both of those things, people will buy in drove. And again, turnkey properties, it's what real estate investors want most. And we saw it in spades with this project. So our conclusion, well, let us help position your pre-construction condo projects as turnkey investments that sell. Take advantage of our knowledge and insight that we've seen with all these different projects. What works, what doesn't, modeling successes such as this Waterloo project, and and help us, get your buildings selling faster for higher returns and more satisfied clients. So if you're interested in a consultation on how we can help you, click the button up above, and we can take a look at your existing marketing in various ways and hopefully do the same for you and your projects, current projects, or even future projects. Again, a bit about who we are. We're founded in 2007. Since then, we've been focused exclusively on email marketing and real estate profession, and we have a proprietary database of over 1 million investment property owners owning real estate investors from 7 countries worldwide, residential, commercial, and recreational investors, with an emphasis on the United States and Canada. To date, we've promoted over 30 pre-construction condo projects in Ontario, and we are fully compliant with the anti-spam law that's been introduced in Canada since July 2014. So you can visit our website, or if you'd like to call us, you can reach us at the number there. And thanks for attending this webinar. Have a great day.